sometimes controversial, always politically incorrect, and pro-life without exception, without compromise, and without apology. It's the Pro-Life America podcast with your hosts, Sarah Waits and the president of Life Dynamics, Mark Crutcher.
Hey guys, welcome to the show. We're happy to have you. I'm Mark Crutcher, and I'm joined as usual by Sarah Waits.
Hello, everyone.
And this week we have a special guest, my daughter Sheila.
Hey, in the intro we need to have and special guest Sheila Crutcher.
Do we need to do that?
No.
Well, okay. Well, anyway, Sheila's joining us today. We've got a really interesting show to bring you today.
Today, we're talking about the propaganda that happens in schools. Because all this stuff that you're seeing that happens with critical race theory, with the new gender theory, all this stuff is being pushed in the schools. And that's where it's really fermenting, if you will.
Mm-hmm. And also they're openly teaching Marxism, socialism. They're banning good books and trying to introduce inappropriate stuff. They're also allowing biological males to compete in female sports. And it's just getting out of hand, and parents are starting to push back against this. It just came out yesterday that a supposed Republican, the Indiana governor, Eric Holcomb, just vetoed a bill that would have kept biological males from competing in women's sports at the K through 12 level. His reasoning, quote, was no evidence support the claim that there is an existing problem in K through 12 sports in Indiana that requires further state government intervention. And he cited concerns about the bill, quote, increasing the likelihood of litigation against our schools with the courts having to adjudicate the uncertainties.
This thing is getting out of hand. In this issue of sports, the only ultimate result of that will be the total destruction of women's sports.
Yeah.
It'll go away.
Regardless of how you feel about the trans issue, if you just take it from a purely biological standpoint, the data shows that even people who's on estrogen, who's not biologically female, for that long a time, still has physiological advantages over biological females. Mm-hmm. Bone density is different.
And that's not going to change.
Height is different. No, that's not going to change. That is permanently built in.
Yep.
And if you're trying to create this utopia of equality, you're not going to do it by having people compete in a sport who have clear biological advantage against people who cannot physically compete. That's why we have men and women's sports separated to begin with.
Well, females are going to start being erased, especially in sports. And stuff like this has been happening at a college level, and now it's trickling down into elementary school.
And less.
Well, listen to this. I saw on Twitter the other day that an elementary school in Texas, this isn't California or New York or any, liberal other state, but in Texas, hosted what they called a gay pride parade, and students were forced to march in the hallways with flags and signs.
And we'll put the link to the video in the description.
And supposedly they're going to do another one outside, but parents raised the stink about it. And so now they're doing a closed one inside again. Why are they making students do this?
Austin, Texas is now San Francisco.
It's the Los Angeles or San Francisco of
It's
Texas.
San Francisco, and University of Texas at Austin is Berkeley. I mean, that's the reality. It's an embarrassment. But the point here that we need to be making is that all of this stuff is related to something that those of us in the pro-life movement have been talking about for years.
Yeah.
And that is the infection, if you will, of our school systems by organizations like Planned Parenthood.
Yeah, and it's been going on for years. And the pro-life movement has been trying to tell people, hey, this stuff is creeping into our school system, but conservative parents have largely been checked out and like, not a big deal. And then all of a sudden, the snake has come up to bite them and they're like, where did this come from?
They trusted the school board and they trusted the school system and the teachers and the administration and so forth when they shouldn't have.
Yeah, I've got examples here of some things that we'll go over just to kind of show how this has been going on for a while. And the consistent theme you find in these articles are parents feel betrayed. When something like this comes out, they're like, I trusted the school system to protect my kids, and instead they're introducing this. In fact, in 2012, a principal for a small elementary school in Onalaska, Washington, so this is not major Washington area, this is a small city, the principal instructed students on how to perform oral and anal sex. This curriculum was part of the state-approved Family Life and Sexual Health, or F.L.A.H curriculum that was orchestrated, developed, and pushed by guess who? Planned Parenthood, NARAL, and SICUS, and we'll go over them in a minute. So parents were obviously really upset about this, and the superintendent defended the principal by saying, I think the principal handled it appropriately at the time. She only gave factual information and no demonstrations. Well, I guess we can thank our lucky stars for that.
Yeah,
And
right.
we can trust what they're saying anyway.
And then in another interview, he said that she stuck to the curriculum. Oh, well, it's all good then.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, it's fine.
No big
People
deal.
are just pervs, plain and simple. They're perverts.
I've been saying that for years. And when you turn your kids over to Planned Parenthood, you're turning them over to sexual deviants and perverts. That's what they are. And now this thing has grown
Oh, yeah.
into other areas besides. But you can go back and look at some of this stuff, and we've talked about it. We've given examples of it. We've got books right here in the office that we've talked about before from Planned Parenthood that are used in these schools. It is pornography.
Yeah.
There's no other way to describe it. And it pushes abortion, of course, and it pushes promiscuity, which is what you have to have a lot of numbers of abortions.
And it's growing. In New York, there's a senator who's introducing a bill that would require each public and charter school to provide students in grades kindergarten through 12, so this starts in kindergarten, with comprehensive sexuality education. Now, we've seen bills like this going in numerous states across the country, but I want to go over hers right now. So her proposal would link New York schools to the recommendations of SICUS, which is Sexuality Information and Education Council of the United States. Now, if you think this sounds neutral, SICUS declares that sex ed is a vehicle for social change. They add, it's a golden opportunity to create a culture shift on things such as sexual and reproductive health and rights issues, reproductive justice, LGBTQ equality, gender equality, and dismantling white supremacy through sex education.
Yeah, that makes sense.
How does that work?
Well, let's go over some of their quote curriculum, right? Because in 2020, they did a huge update in order to focus on intersectionality, racism, and hormone blockers for children. So they decide that by 5th grade, students should be able to describe the role hormones play. And you think, okay, that sounds neutral, right? The potential role of hormone blockers on young people who identify as transgender. Now, this is elementary school, right? 5th grade. By the end of 8th grade, they should be able to define racism and intersectionality and describe their impacts on sexual health. Students will also be expected to define the different sexual identities. By 12th grade, they should be able to analyze cultural and social factors such as sexism, homophobia, transphobia, racism, ableism, classism that can influence decisions regarding sexual behaviors.
So instead of teaching them about stuff, that they should be taught, like reading, writing,
Science,
arithmetic, history.
Right.
They're worried about all this BS that are pushed in college, and now they're teaching it to elementary school.
And Planned Parenthood is one of the people who was instrumental in creating the research for this bill.
Well, of course, people that think that, this is just pockets in liberal school systems, no, it's not. It's a widespread problem. Planned Parenthood, from their own website, says that they are the largest provider of sex education in the United States, reaching 1.2 million people. They offer a variety of programs, including unintended pregnancy programs. Gee, I wonder what that entails. Abortion.
Right.
Yeah.
And STI prevention programs. They offer peer education programs, training for professionals. They try to reach young people online to, quote, ensure that they can access sex education information even if they aren't getting that in school.
Let's define what that quote sex information education is, because there was a really interesting thing that came out last June. So there was a middle school teacher at Stewart Middle School who distributed a Planned Parenthood flyer to 8th graders. The flyer informed students that they can get abortions no matter their age without asking for their parents' consent. It also told them that they could get Plan B at their local pharmacy without a prescription, regardless of their age. Same thing for birth control. And they also go over that you don't need a permission for a parent to go get STD and HIV testing or treatment. So basically, this was You don't need your parents. You can do all this stuff. You're good to go.
Well, that's also part of reaching them online. They realize that not all schools will allow them in.
Well, we're seeing a number of states and school districts cut ties with Planned Parenthood because of the content that's in there.
Well, let's make sure we understand what the goal here is. It is increased sexual activity by children. That's what the goal is. I'm old enough to remember when sex education was first brought into the public school system back in the 60s. I was there. And my high school was one that introduced sex education. They called it home and family living at the time. And it
sounds so quaint.
Yes, it was very quaint.
It's probably a lot more innocent than it was now, am I wrong?
It was.
Yeah.
Here's what they were claiming at the time, the problem they were trying to solve, which was what they called the double standard. The double standard was, and it did exist, and it needed to be addressed.
Yeah.
That if a boy was sexually active, he was just a young man exercising,
sowing his wild
oats, and he was just fine. But if his sister was sexually active, she was a tramp. Now, this was a problem that they saw in this double standard.
Yeah.
The reality was there was no double standard. There was one standard. It was called abstinence, and boys didn't live up to it as high as girls did. So Planned Parenthood now sees this and says, we're going to go into the schools and address these double standards and other sexual problems that they saw. Now, instead of going in and saying, we're going to demand higher standards from the boys.
Oh, we can't possibly do that.
What they did was they said, we're going to accept lower standards from the girls.
Yeah.
And that's what they did. Because understand something. They were in the process at that point of creating what would eventually become the abortion industry. If you're going to make money off of abortions, what you've got to have is pregnant females who don't want to be pregnant. Well, where's your best place to get those? In a high school.
They're even bringing programs, and they talk about this on their website, to places like foster care and justice facilities. And they say that they support, quote, equity in sex education. And they say that sex education is incredibly popular, so people should just accept it across the board, whether you're a Democrat, Republican, conservative, liberal. They say everyone should just accept the sex education. And they do marketing campaigns that are specifically eye-catching to young people. A recent example was that at the South by Southwest Festival in Austin, they had what they quote, an abortion rights ice cream truck.
Now this is a music festival.
Yeah,
it started out as a music festival, and then kind of music and film, and now there's panels.
Yeah, but they had a converted ice cream truck where they handed out condoms and they gave out information.
It was so funny to see the reaction online, because Alexis McGill tweeted this.
She's the president of Planned Parenthood.
Yeah, she was so proud of this creepy, bizarre condom ice cream truck. And even pro-choicers are like, this is gross.
Yeah, right.
Somebody tweeted, well, I didn't know that ice cream trucks could get any more sleazy.
I mean, they might as well just drive around in a windowless white van. Just say, hey, little kid, come here, let me
open the door while they're still rolling.
Hey, little girl, let me show you
Tossing out condoms.
Yeah.
Again, we've got to make sure people understand. The goal here was to increase sexual activity among children. That's the goal. Because that's where you get your abortion customers from.
Last year, Vermont became the first state to legally require that condoms be made to middle school and high school students across the state.
Yep.
This was something that just came into law. And guess where they're getting the condoms from? I'll give you one wild guess.
Right.
Planned Parenthood is donating the condoms. Planned Parenthood, you've said this before, and people kind of balk at it, but Planned Parenthood wants to be in the schools, not just handing out literature. They want to be having clinics inside the schools.
Oh, absolutely.
I know there are people who are listening to this and think, no, this is crazy. Well, in California and Los Angeles, Planned Parenthood has opened clinics inside Los Angeles high schools.
I think it was like 50 clinics that they were wanting to open.
And so it started in 2019. They began with 50. Millions of dollars was poured into this, not only by Planned Parenthood, but by the county. But these clinics are going to, quote, quote, offer a full range of birth control options, testing and treatment for sexually transmitted infections, and pregnancy counseling. Now, they're quick to say, but not abortion. But I mean, this is Planned Parenthood.
This is the camel's nose under the tent.
They may not do abortions in the schools, but
you know that they're going to refer them.
Oh, yeah.
And on top of that, students will be able to walk into the clinics and make appointments and leave class for them. Information about the appointments will be in protected medical files, not accessible to school officials. 2 public health officials trained by Planned Parenthood will be stationed full-time at each school, and a Planned Parenthood nurse practitioner or other medical provider in quotes, will come in once a week. So you have not only Planned Parenthood training, but you have Planned Parenthood employees who are coming in.
Well, you're saying that this won't be available to staff at the school? It won't be available to the parents either. They're out of the loop on this deal.
And I think the thing that we need to be reminding people is that Planned Parenthood has been caught not reporting the statutory rape of minors.
Right.
And the thing that protects pedophiles is junk like that, where there's no reporting.
And they were caught by us. We're the group that did the undercover sting operation.
We got the clips and the tapes online.
You can go to our childpredator.com website and listen to the clips when we stung these people. But this is obviously a disgraceful situation, and I think people are starting to wake up to how disgraceful it is. And it is angering that we've been talking about this in the pro-life movement for 25 or 30 years and being ignored even by people on our side of these issues. But that's okay. Better late than never if people start getting on board and we can fight this thing. Now, so the question becomes, what do we do about this?
I mean, we get people calling in asking, what they can do because they all of a sudden find out that they're pushing this in their own school that their kid attends or their own school district.
It's like cockroaches. It's easier to keep them out than it is to get them out once they're in.
Yeah.
I hate to compare Planned Parenthood to cockroaches because I don't want to get sued by some cockroach association for having compared them to Planned Parenthood people, because the Planned Parenthood people are definitely worse than cockroaches. But let me make a couple points here. There's a couple of things we can do here. First off, the first one we're not going to do. I have said for a long time, it is time for people to wake up and just accept that the experiment with public education has failed. Even if it was well intended, even if everybody had the best of intentions here to educate the American kids, it has failed.
See, I disagree. But that's because I'm a public school kid.
It's
And I am
worse
too.
today, though, since you've been.
Well, and each school district's different because each and every school district has different standards for what they teach.
Well, if I were running for president and somebody said, what's your position on education? I'd say, I'm going to appoint a panel the day that I get into office. I'm going to appoint a panel, and they will be charged with the following mission. They will be there to come up with a plan. I don't care if it takes them a year or 2 years to do it. Come up with a written plan for how we get out of the public school morass. That's the only solution to it ultimately.
I think that education credit that was proposed was really interesting, where parents were basically given a credit that money was going to go to a school one way or another, but they got to choose which school in their area the kid would attend, and the money would go to that school.
Well,
that's the way you do it. It creates competition and it forces schools to be at their best.
Well, more and more parents are starting to see stuff that's going on with the public schools, and especially after COVID, a lot more are just homeschooling. They're like, I don't want to send my child back to public school. I want to educate them myself.
Well, and sometimes the quote distance learning left a lot to be desired.
Yeah, until the rest of the nation catches up with me
with you
and agrees that the solution is to do away with the public education system. We have a project that we're pushing, and we're in the process, as y'all know, of creating things that people can do in their own community.
Yeah.
So they don't feel helpless against the abortion.
And one of those is called Operation Watchdog. As long as we're going to have public school systems, our people, when I say our people, I mean people that would be upset or outraged at some of the things that are happening in the schools, need to be going to their school systems and saying, we want to have watchdogs inside the classrooms. We want to have access. You could do it with remote cameras. You could do it relatively cheaply, even in a large school system. And say, we're going to have cameras and microphones in each classroom so that that teacher knows that if she says something or he says something that's inappropriate, it may be heard. Because
of social media, there are a lot of times students who will record stuff that happens in classrooms and they'll post it to social media.
Much to the teacher's chagrin.
And then parents will see that and they'll watch it And then that's when they learn, hey, there's stuff that's going on that's not appropriate. And then that's when they start, getting onto the board and the school system.
Well, what put me onto this was I had a lady from Washington State call one day, and she was livid.
Yeah.
Her son came home, I think he was 14, telling how embarrassed he was about what was presented. There was a Planned Parenthood counselor that had been brought in to give a presentation to the kids, and he said it was really embarrassing, and kids were squirming around and having to talk about things they didn't want to talk about and saying some things that were just outrageous. And she said, I raised a ruckus with the school.
Yeah.
This counselor was going to be at that school for like 2 weeks.
2 weeks?
2 weeks.
Wow.
And she said, I'm going to sit in on those classes. And they allowed her to sit in.
Because she has a legal right to know what's being taught to her kid.
To her kids. She sat in on the class, and she said everything was perfect. She said, I couldn't have asked for it to be better. And she said, then I left, and the next day, it went back to what it was. And it told me that when these perverts and sexual deviants from Planned Parenthood come up with these programs, they know good and well that the public is going to be outraged if they hear this stuff. And so we got to make sure that the public hears it. And you could it'd be very simple online to create a channel where every class in a high school or junior high or elementary or whatever, now a kindergarten is what they're pushing for next, that feed goes into that channel, and any parent using their phone could go on there and look and see what their kid is
like
being
Zoom
told.
or Google.
Well, there
Hangout.
are some school districts that have started putting cameras in the classrooms. And then there are even some school districts that are trying to say it's illegal for, cameras in the classroom or, for parents to know what they're teaching their kids. There was a whole uproar about it about a month ago where these politicians were saying, hey, it's not the parents' job to teach their kids or know what they're being taught.
Well, that was an issue in the recent Virginia governor's race where you actually had liberal Democrats in Virginia saying that what the public school system was teaching to children was none of the parents' business. They had no right to even know what was being taught.
I dare somebody to have told that to my mother.
Right, but anyway, I think this Operation Watchdog idea is what we've got to do. As long as we're going to have this debacle of public education, as long as that's going to exist, we need to know what's going on. And by the way, I had a lady that I had advised about this one time before, and she said, well, I'm older, all my kids are out of school, they're all adults. And she said, I don't have any kids in the local school system, but I hear what's going on there.
Doesn't matter, you're a taxpayer.
You're a taxpayer. That's what I said. You don't have to have children there. You pay taxes, you have a right to know how your money is being spent.
For anybody who thinks that parents or people in the district don't have that much power, I want to refer them to just a couple of things. Last year, the Clarence Central School District invited Planned Parenthood to give a presentation on their quote services offered to students in high school health class. In the description of the presentation for the permission slip, it stated that the presentation covers quote services offered, information about STIs, getting STI tests, birth control, and many other services are mentioned, which abortion is that thing that is lumped under many other services because they're not going to mention that. So one of the parents reached out to the school district's health director immediately because they were concerned about what this actually entailed and what was in that many other services.
The fine print.
She was denied access to the presentation by the director, the superintendent, and the principal, according to the school that they had been giving this presentation for years and it was never a problem, so she should just be okay with it, right? But with the help from the ACLJ, she went back to them with more information and insisted that they give her access to their curriculum and insisted that the permission slip, adding in there including abortion, because of course abortion was one of those other services that they were going to discuss. The parent was finally granted access and they updated the permission slip so that parents wouldn't be deceived on this. But she took them to the mat on this deal. And then in the Saline Area School District in Michigan, in 2017, they announced that they would not use Planned Parenthood sex education for students because of the overwhelming negative responses they received from the public.
Good. The bottom line is you have to be the squeaky wheel.
Yeah.
If I had children, I wouldn't let any of these freaks come near them.
I said on the Life Talk years ago, if you turn your children over to these Planned Parenthood counselors, you might as well turn them over to the guy with the raincoat standing out by the playground. It's the same group of people.
Yeah, Live Action exposed these quote-unquote counselors talking to what they thought was a 15-year-old girl about sex stuff, and they were advising her on BDSM, bondage, domination.
And these are the same people that are pushing the trans thing, the critical race theory, socialism, Marxism. I mean,
It's the same group of people. Anyway, that's our show. Anybody got anything else before we...
If you have any questions about getting involved in your school district, you're more than welcome to reach out to us and give us a call. We'll put our contact information in the description. And share this episode with everybody you know, because this stuff is going to keep escalating and continue, and parents need to be involved. They need to be on top of this.
It's stoppable now, but eventually it's going to cross that line where it's going to be too late, and we can't allow that to happen.
You really have two choices. Either you get involved and get these perverts out of the school system, or you get your child out of the school system, but you do not put them together. Anyway, that's all the time we have. Thank you for joining us, Sheila.
Of course.
And until next Thursday, remember, Life Dynamics is not here to put up a good fight.
We're here to win.
Because winning is how the killing stops. We'll see you next week.
Bye, guys.